approval? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any dissent? Minutes of March 1 are approved. Old business, Miranda, you are up with transportation projects update.
Afternoon, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. The project updates start on page 9 of your packet. And I will just highlight a few as per usual. The Eagle Road, Amity to Victory roundabout is closed right now for the Zaldia Eagle roundabout to be built. The closure will last about 3 weeks. There's another closure at 10 Mile Amity that's expected to last about 60 days as they do work there on that intersection. The McMillan Black Cat intersection was added to the project's update as requested. And the plan as of now is to do a 3x3 configuration there. The Victory Road Locust Grove roundabout has a website now, so I added that link. And the Eagle Lake Hazel to Amity on page 11, a traffic analysis was done to review a couple of alternatives, and it was determined that a multi-lane roundabout will be used at Taconic. Moving on to the ITD projects on page 12, there is a significant update there for the Linder Road to Locust Grove portion as they continue to work on that. The sound wall will be constructed next to the pathway there, and there are some road closures still going on out there. The South Meridian Bike and Pedestrian Plan on page 14 is open for comments at this time, so I'd encourage you to go to that website link there in your packet and make any comments that you have on pedestrian and bike improvements in South Meridian. The only other update I have is for transit, and I did not get it into this update, and I apologize, is that the VRT cooperative agreement was approved by council on March 23rd for the fiscal year that we're currently in. And that is all I have for project updates as a summary of those. If I can take any questions.
Questions for Miranda on the projects? Anyone? Okay, thank you, ma'am. Next item of business is item 3 under new business, Meridian Police Department report. Sergeant Frazier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the things I wanted to touch on piggybacks off of one of the items Miranda hit on, which is road construction at Eagle and Amity and Eagle and Victory. That's created a lot of citizen inquiry at our office. One of the things, well, several of the things that they've brought up is increased volume and speed and changing of routes due to what construction, specifically where the construction is going on and things of that nature. We've worked with ACHD quite a bit, and ACHD has worked with the project manager there to spend a little bit more time communicating and thinking through decisions when the detours or closures are adjusted, because the citizens up in that area aren't a fan of what's going on. And certainly we all understand that all that construction's for a greater good. In the last month, I've probably had 40 to 50 inquiries from citizens in that area. Both of our radar trailers are down in that neck of the woods right now, and our team is spending a lot of time down there. Thankfully, once it's all over, it will be better, and we're not too far from being done. The other thing partially touches on something that's in your guys' packet. It has to do with noises or noise complaints regarding exhaust brakes. We've received some complaints in addition to the one that's in the packet. I spoke with that gentleman as well. regarding Jake brakes or exhaust brakes on Chinden. And I know we've talked about this before. The one point of clarification maybe that I wanted to make is from my standpoint or our office. When people are calling and complaining, they're complaining about commercial trucks using exhaust brakes or Jake brakes. It's not modified exhaust. It's not just generally loud exhaust. It's not increased traffic volume or normal traffic noises. It is the Jake brake that they're complaining about. Jake brakes or exhaust brakes are against the law in Meridian and in Ada County as a whole, and other cities have ordinances against those. Chinden can be challenging because depending on where on Chinden you're at and which direction you're going, you could be in Boise, Meridian, Eagle, or unincorporated Ada County. But we do what we can in that stretch. Primarily, people's complaints are not in the city of Meridian. They're further east, closer towards Boise, and in the city of Eagle. And then we have an uptick in complaints in people that live in the Brea senior living apartments near Eagle and River Valley, or specifically River Valley and Records. This is a topic we've discussed at the Transportation Commission before. There's a lot of traffic that goes by there. Some of the traffic is loud. We deal with loud exhaust complaints, and we've talked about the ways that we can and can't change that behavior in our motoring public through my office. I think that's all I have. I would open it up to any questions, and I think there might be some questions on the next agenda item as well regarding the parking issue.
Thank you, Sergeant. Questions for the sergeant?
Mr. Chairman.
I heard Dave Ballard first.
Okay.
Sergeant, related to the construction activity, I attended a conference a while back, a couple weeks, about debris falling off of motor vehicles, in particular dump trucks and the like, servicing construction sites. Do you receive complaints into the police department? And if so, is there any, what enforcement, if any, may be undertaken by Meridian Police?
I've not heard of any complaints of that. I can't think of a citizen complaint or officer observation of those things specific to the road projects or construction. There's Idaho statute on point that deals with hauling loads. They have to be secured so as not to create a hazard or come loose or things of that nature. So if we were faced with that question or that scenario, that is a state statute that would apply, and the driver of the vehicle could be cited for that.
Very good. I appreciate that, because one of the questions I had, and Mr. Lancaster will appreciate this, I asked if there was data available for incidents, and what were they, basically they're talking about gravel and debris coming off of dump trucks. And I'm not singling them out per se, but very few incidents, if any. And there are a hazard, but apparently we escape any more serious harm. So I appreciate you addressing that, sir. Thank you.
You bet.
Lancaster, you had a question for the sergeant?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sergeant Frazier, I guess I'm interested in further elaboration on the compression brakes and complaints. So, you know, I guess I'm interested in your enforcement abilities. I mean, so what is Meridian Police able to do about compression brakes? I imagine if you get a phone call complaining about, you know, a truck or trucks, unless you're right there, you can't do anything. So I guess I'm interested in, you know, how do you enforce that ordinance?
Yeah, that's a good question. Anytime you look at a problem like that, you know, education is key. In other words, having the truck drivers know that the use of a Jake brake is largely against the law. And they all know that from my experience. And it's just like speeding. A trucker who's paying attention won't use a Jake brake in the wrong situation when they see a police officer, just like somebody won't speed. And we get a citizen complaint or complaints about that. It's very difficult to do anything about it. The other thing about those ordinances and the use of those brakes in general is if the vehicle operator feels that they had to use the Jake brake in order to prevent damage or injury to another person or another thing. In other words, they say, I know you're not supposed to use your Jake brake, but I did it this time because traffic stopped really fast. And if I didn't, I was afraid I was going to crash. That's a free pass on the Jake brake ordinance. And everybody still hears all the noise and so forth. So it's not something that officers patrolling Chinden all day and all night to catch these people is going to have any effect. That's not going to have any effect on the problem, I don't think.
Sergeant, if I,
Mr. Chairman, if I can ask a follow-up?
yes, please, and then I've got a question on the same topic. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So Sergeant Frazier, I guess to that end, I guess what do we do about it? Is there anything to be done, or, do you just have to deal with getting the phone call complaints? If it's a difficult ordinance to enforce, I guess, is there any action or any way this mission can be involved, or do we just have to live with it?
It would be my opinion, there's not really anything that can be done. It's a product of growth and all the traffic and the size of the roads and the activity going on. I would venture to guess that I'm sure that I could dedicate a person full-time to Jake brake enforcement, and that person would be hard pressed to write 5 tickets in 1 year because we don't see it happen. And so certainly we have more pressing things going on and things that we're able to do more about, but that is an issue that the citizens have feedback and complain about quite a bit. But from my standpoint, there's nothing we can do that we're not already doing.
Sergeant, without going into too much detail, can you explain to those of us who don't know the differences between Jake brakes, compression brakes, exhaust brakes, and any other term I missed in all of this?
Well, it's kind of interesting. It depends on what statute you're reading or ordinance and how the ordinance defines those things. Some city ordinances, by their plain reading, outlaw the engine in a truck, which is kind of curious because an engine can be used to slow down the truck by shifting down a gear. But by and large, what we're talking about is a device that reverses the compression and exhaust of combustion gases within a combustion engine. And that's that loud rattly noise that you hear. It's kicked on by a switch or a button inside the truck when the truck is slowing down. It sounds like it's exhaust, but it's different than regular muffler exhaust from acceleration or shifting gears or whatever. It's very noticeable. It's very different than just having a modified exhaust system. In my experience, truck carriers really stay away from modified exhaust because you have federal problems that go into effect there. A large number of commercial vehicles nowadays are certified clean idle as well. And if you're modifying exhaust, you're avoiding warranties and looking at federal penalties. So a Jake brake, exhaust brake, compression brake are essentially all the same thing if you ask the right person. And it's just another way to slow a big heavy truck down without burning up the brakes.
Do you think that, is it possible that most of the complaints that we get about Jake brakes are really trucks that are just downshifting to drag the engine a little bit?
It's possible. It could also be there from passenger pickup trucks, diesels that have modified exhaust. It's hard to say what a citizen would hear and then say, oh, that was a Jake brake or an exhaust brake, or it was caused by a semi truck. If they're hearing it from inside their house, not watching it take place.
Okay. Other questions for the sergeant?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
if we can indulge one that comes in the packet later, but I think it I don't see it explicitly as a agenda item, so I guess I'd like to ask about it now, but the Main and King Crosswalk update. So we've got some information here from Mr. Martin. Thank you for that. But, this one has lingered for a long time. I know Sergeant Arnold, um, you know, did a plainclothes kind of study here. I guess Sergeant Frazier, since you're on the hot seat, I guess, is there any news there from a police or enforcement or things you see on the street perspective at the Main and King crosswalk?
Thank you. I am aware that's been on, I think it's been lingering on the agendas and packets ever since I came to the traffic team and replaced Sergeant Arnold. I know the kind of the roots of that project or discussion, but personally, I'm not aware of any specific additional information or really a need for that. I'm not aware of any public input on the matter. It's not something that my office has paid a lot of attention to or really has given much thought to.
I think Ms. Carson has a comment on that, sir.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, in the staff communications, there's some update on the Main King crosswalk. They do have it in the program. I say they, ACHD does have it in their program to install an enhanced crosswalk in FY24 with construction in FY25. So there's not anything further that we can do at this point to advance that. We have it on our request list, and so that helped advance it. And now we just have to wait for the programming to work its process.
And that's the reason why it's been taken off the future topics list, was it's going to get handled at some point in time, and without the police department or someone else feeling it's more urgent than let the system work its way, we'll just not keep putting it on there and took it off. Okay, anything else for the sergeant?
Thank you, Sergeant.
Thank you, Sergeant. Next item, number 4, Washington Street, Meridian to Main parking complaint. Ms. Carson, I believe this was brought by Mr. Falwell. And I don't know is he on with us today? We hadn't heard that he would be.
No, Mr. Chair, he's not on. I did send him a couple notices just to let him know that it would be on in case he wanted to attend.
Okay.
So this
You
issue,
want to go ahead and give us that, please?
yes, Mr. Chair, this issue was brought forward by a citizen, as the chair said there was concern at Washington Street, Meridian, Maine. There on page 16 of your packet, you can see a map of that small stretch of street. The resident had requested residential only parking on that street, as I'm sure most of you are aware, and I'll clarify for the new folks here. We as a city do not have a residential parking system. That's a system that takes oversight from city staff. It has to be set up. Permits have to be handed out. Addresses have to be checked. It's a whole process and a whole system. It's not something that you would just determine lightly and put signs up for. So at this point, the city has just up to now has not instituted any kind of residential parking system. So the request for residential only parking was quickly set aside and worked with the resident to explore some time restricted parking. The concern is that there are neighbors, there are employers who are neighboring that street, who are having their employees park on that street, is what the resident reported. So spoke to ACHD about whether time restriction would be applicable there. Their take on that was that if they could get 75% petition signed and MPD supported it, they could put out those time restrictions. After speaking with MPD Code Enforcement Supervisor Lacey Oy and Sergeant Frazier, they both expressed some concerns with that time restriction and the fact that our current code enforcement for those parking restrictions downtown isn't adjacent to that. So enforcement would have to leave the area that they're patrolling, to my understanding, and go outside of that area to enforce on this one street. So at this point, MPD is not supporting time restricted parking in that area. I had told the resident that this would be an item on the agenda, so I put it on the agenda to be faithful to that word. At this point, it doesn't seem like there's much more forward to go on this issue.
And if I can elaborate on that, the original complaint specified a particular business a block or two away, which the resident said was instructing its employees to park down on Washington, or I guess elsewhere than in their parking lot. They do have a parking lot with the business, but they apparently wanted to keep it available for customers and have the employees elsewhere. That's what we know about it. If Sergeant Frazier confirms that MPD is not a fan of going to timed parking there, and the city council as a whole has discussed sometime in the past residential parking permits, and at that point did not elect to go that route, and to my understanding are not yet ready to really consider it. I think we're kind of at a loss as to what to do to help the situation. Sergeant, do you have anything to add?
I think that sums it up. We have a very small area in the downtown core that has restricted parking or timed parking on it. Our code enforcement division enforces that on foot. This area is not really adjacent to that area. It would be difficult to enforce knowing who the citizen complainant is and the business in question. I would first of all doubt that 75% of the residents would come to an agreement to enact that, and it would get really sticky as well with residents parking their own vehicles on the streets. I mean, we'd be dealing with complaints of residences or people visiting houses getting tickets. There's only one business on that street, and everything else is residential. So it's not a good idea in my opinion, and it's not something that we have the ability to oversee either.
Yes, sir, Mr. Ballard.
I was curious if this is a problem that's developed, or this complaint has developed over, let's say, the last year, and in particular, the last 6 months, due to construction there, and in particular, the sewer line that's being installed east-west. The construction across the road here. I'm just wondering if, once that construction ends and the parking spaces that have been taken up by the construction activity, the lack of parking inside the construction zones, I know it's not a good answer, but this problem, does it somewhat lessen itself once we get back to a normal flow, if you will, without the construction activities? You can look across the street and there's 3 streets that have lost parking due to construction activities. But just a thought.
Mr. Ballard, it could be a component. The specific complaint about where a business was named, the business is to the north of this, and I believe the construction you're talking about is to the south of this. So although there could be some overflow up to Washington from the south, the named request that came to us had to do with a business to the north. Anyone else have anything?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Lancaster.
where this is a specific complaint about a specific business, has there been any verification that this is actually, verify that this business is actually doing this? And if so, can it be as informal as, city staff asking this business to knock it off? Is the solution that simple? If it's even a verified problem?
Mr. Chair.
When I first heard about this, I was in the neighborhood and I rode by. There didn't seem to be a problem, but then I learned that the particular business wasn't open that morning, so I certainly haven't attempted to verify it, or I guess I attempted but didn't. Miranda?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, to reach out to that business, the residents have reached out to the business, to my understanding, and spoke to them and asked them to stop having their employees park there. The business does have a community relations staff member that they said they have reached out to, and that was the exact advice I gave them. I don't feel as a city that we have a place to reach out and tell a business that you can't have your employees park on a public street that has public parking. Right now, there's nothing restricting the business from parking there, so I wouldn't feel right telling them to please stop parking there.
This is an interesting situation for me because in a former position, we were trying to clear up spaces in a small downtown area so customers could find parking. And we're encouraging employers to tell your employees, go out and park in the residential area. Get them out of downtown because they're in front of your door. And that's why customers can't do business with you. So it's an interesting problem, and one that apparently comes with having a home on a residential street that's near a downtown or near a college or something like that.
I will say, I also told the resident that they're welcome to park on the street if they want to park there before the employees show up, and then use their driveway for their guests. Because their complaint was when they have guests, they don't have parking.
Okay, anything else, anyone? Ms. Carson, you and I talk, and we'll work out a way to communicate back to Mr. Falwell what we can tell him, okay? All right, next item on the agenda is staff communications. Ms. Carson again.
All right, Mr. Chair, I apologize. I didn't mean to be taking so much of the floor today. Staff communications this month, I set it up a little bit differently just based on some requests I've gotten in the past for formatting. If this is a format that the commission does not like, please let me know and I'm happy to change it back. Rather than putting in the full correspondence, I put in some summaries of correspondence. So the high capacity results that we discussed a few months ago are in, and you can go to either one of those links to view those results. The second item is the 2021 Chinden braking complaint. So Ms. Sergeant Frazier did speak well to the MPD's stance on that. This particular item here has a lot of ITD's stance on that. And just kind of a summary of ITD's stance is that they don't have a solution for the engine braking, and they don't intend to sign for individual cities who have ordinances against engine braking. They won't be continuing to put those signs up. As signs become worn out, they will be taken down with other projects that are being done. The third issue there is Vanderbilt and Litchfield. There was a request for a 4-way stop from a resident. ACHD had already done an evaluation of the area and responded to that resident with some improvements they had made and some coordination they did with the city. With the school district on improving that 4-way stop.
If I could, when you're finished, I've got a comment on that. Go ahead.
Okay. I've already spoke to the Main King Crosswalk and the South Meridian call for comments. And then the last issue is just some parking that was requested, some updated parking lines on Idaho Street here in downtown. And the Meridian Development Corporation is working on getting those done. I stand for questions.
On the Vanderbilt and Litchfield 4-way stop requests, Sergeant Frazier, have you had an opportunity to look at that?
This one specifically, I've heard of it in the past. I'm looking through the packet right now. That's a common complaint for that general area out there in the west.
Mr. Chairman, I have a comment on this.
Yes, sir. Is this your neighborhood, Mr. Schumacher?
Yeah, you could probably throw a baseball and hit my house from that picture. So I will tell you, and I'm probably guilty as well. People do go quickly through Vanderbilt to get to Black Cat or 10 Mile, depending on which. And I think with the school within the neighborhood, it's just probably common that people drive faster through there in that area in particular because they're racing to get out on Black Cat. And I saw the improvements that ACHD did with the marking, and I think it's better. But if I don't want my wife to get pulled over, but I think for sure there could be some extra patrolling through that area with that school, and I think that would slow people down. I know there's quite a bit of construction traffic too still going through there. So anyways, it's a quick street that a lot of people drive very quickly through. And I hope the signs help, but some extra enforcement would help as well.
Yeah, the Vanderbilt through there, I believe, is the through street, and it is a straight shot for a couple of blocks east and at least a couple of blocks west. I guess that's ACHD painted slow before the intersection on both sides of it, and then they have two, one on each side, warning sign, ped crossing ahead, and then they have two ped crossing signs at the crossing itself. The problem from the description is that the school lies one block to the right of the intersection in the picture to the south. Sergeant, I know you said you have both of your radar trailers tied up in South Meridian. Maybe sometime before school's out, you might be able to position one out there, and not only to remind people of the speed limit, but I presume those are counting and speed tracking trailers. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, yeah, we do have one radar trailer that counts and we're able to do speed study data with. And during the previous comments, I was looking through speed study results from ACHD I have in the area. The 85th percentile speed in the general area is 30 miles an hour within the last 8 to 10 months, and none on Vanderbilt specifically, but other streets in the area. When our officers go out there, we usually find people traveling 28 to 32 miles an hour. We receive a lot of complaints about people not stopping at stop signs, which we do observe from time to time. It's one of those areas where we don't necessarily see the volume or the frequency of problems that the neighbors do for whatever reason. Our radar trailer has been on Vanderbilt a couple times in the last year and a half, and we will keep that on the rotation list. Yeah.
Okay, and personally, I believe that a neighbor watching cars on their street believes they're going faster than the speedometer in the car says they are. I mean, the car going by your front door looks faster than it really is. But, you know, school crossing like this one is. Sergeant, do you know would this qualify for a school crossing zone type signage of any kind, or is it does not rise to that? Do you know?
Are you referring to a reduced speed limit?
Yes.
I don't offhand know whether it does or not. So yeah, I don't have an answer for you there.
Okay, we'll keep an eye on it and maybe see, Ms. Carson, if we could check with ACHD and see if they have looked at it for a school crossing, if it rises to that. I understand that it doesn't rise to a four-way crossing, a four-way stop. I get that.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
so we could ask Sean, have you looked at that for us? What's the criteria for a school crossing?
I'm not sure if we have looked at that location in particular. Usually if kids are crossing the school and it is a marked crosswalk there, so we would typically have at a minimum either school zone signs or perhaps 20 miles an hour when children are present signs. But I'd have to go out there and look at that location in particular.
Mr. Chair.
It does not have school crossing. It has pedestrian crossing signs. And like I say, I'm guessing those painted slow signs on the pavement are more recent, to try to upgrade cautioning on it. Mr. Martin, if you find your way to take a look at it a little more and maybe report back to us next month, I'd appreciate it.
We typically don't paint slow on the pavement, so I'm guessing that probably wasn't us, but it could have been, but not normally.
Mr. Chair.
Pretty well done. I don't know who did it. Yes, ma'am.
The traffic engineer from ACHD did say that they put up school crossing signs. So that was on March 9th. Did you go out? Okay.
I can go back. It's almost in my neighborhood too. It's easy to drive by. I'll go back and take a look at it, but it wasn't school crossing when I went by, and I went by right after I saw it in the packet.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
this is Commissioner Lancaster. A couple thoughts for you. So first thought, we do have our school subcommittee, and perhaps we could talk with Mr. Ian Updike further. We had penciled in to meet today, and that didn't end up happening, so perhaps we'll meet in the next month before school gets out to talk about any observed issues this year, right? For strategies for next school year. So if it's the chairman's desire, we could discuss further in our subcommittee. Is that something you'd like us to do, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir. I think that would be a great idea.
Okay. And then, Mr. Chairman, if I can make just a comment. So the Pentagon signs, those are the school crossing signs. So a diamond-shaped sign would be the pedestrian crossing, whereas a Pentagon-shaped sign with the parent and child, that would be the school crossing sign. So I think that's what's referred to here.
Okay, I think it's a parent and child sign, if I remember. And they're new and, very prominent. Okay. Anyone else on any of the communication section of today's agenda? All right, the next item is Jared Smith for the Prioritization Subcommittee update. Jared.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, there you are. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, thank you. So this during this previous month, the Transportation Prioritization Subcommittee met. We met on March 24th, and we basically outlined the mission statement and the next steps forward we're taking. So we're really focusing on working with Miranda and working with, throughout the process of getting those request lists from ACHD, taking what we have currently from this previous meeting with these previous prioritizations that we just made this year, working over the course of the year to understand, any developments or anything that's changed, and to really dig into the details. And then once ACHD comes out with their request in November, if there's anything that changes in their request, November to December, working with Miranda to meet with stakeholders in the community and trying to understand why certain priorities are where they are. And then also we've talked about potentially opportunities to work more closely with city council or the mayor's office to understand the broader scheme of things of where development is, where the long-term vision is, and where priorities are at the citywide level as well. So we are taking the list as we currently have it. We're taking some time to look over it, and then we will be meeting again in the future. We foresee meeting somewhere between a bi-monthly or a quarterly basis up until November, December, and then we expect meetings to probably pick up at that point for that brief period of time before we come back in January for those meetings for the broader commission. I think that's the full scope of the report so far. At the moment, we're kind of just at an investigation stage and just kind of doing some research. Not a ton of movement in any direction at this point.
But it looks like something you could get your teeth into.
Absolutely.
Okay, any other comments on that topic? Okay, thank you all for doing that. Next item is the Ordinance and Development Subcommittee update. A meeting was held this afternoon at 2:30 by that group, and Chairman Tom LeClaire is going to speak to that.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. We had another meeting. We've got some input from the mayor's office. We are tracking a couple bills in the legislature too. And of course, they've postponed their business for a while. We don't know how long, but so we thought we'd take another look at those, at further revisions of this proposed ordinance. The direction we're going, I think, to let the commission know is to try to clarify the ordinance, not try to create any new restrictions on these off-road vehicles and carts. And so we will have further. Emily Kane's working on another version of this, and so we're going to have a couple versions to look at our May meeting. We're going to take up this work on May 3rd, and we hope to have a more solid recommendation for the commission at that time. So that's our update regarding the ATV UTV ordinance work that we're doing. And so that's any questions, I guess.
Any questions for Mr. LeClaire?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Lancaster?
so not so much a question, Commissioner LeClaire, but the legislature does resume tomorrow on Tuesday. So
Yeah,
That's
Hands
what-
on your, put your hands on your wallets.
yep.
yeah,
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think I knew that, but it's we're hoping they do some work and get down to one or two reasons to stay in session and then decide if they want to or not. So I think that's the momentum that's going to kick in when they go back to work. And so I think we'll see progress certainly within 30 days on these ordinances that are concerning us. And so we'll, I mean, the bills, the legislation possibly concerning this. You never know if they'll go through or not. And so we just thought we'd hang loose until we see what they do.
Okay, Mr. LeClaire, thank you very much.
All right, you're welcome.
That concludes our topics, with the exception of future meeting topics, which you can see listed on the agenda. The intersection has been taken off. It's been on there ever since anybody remember, so we cleaned that up. Anyone else have any other business?
Well, Mr. Chairman, with
Yes,
the
sir.
ordinance review committee, we've talked about the J brake ordinance. And just as kind of a reminder, that air brake ordinance went through, and this commission was not in favor of the version that went through. I don't know from what Officer Officer Frazier told us today. It seems like our concerns. It sounds like it's hard to enforce this thing in any case, even if there's problems with it. So, but that might be a future item for our subcommittee to see if there's a revision that would help. We're certainly willing to take a look at that in the next few months. And so I just thought I'd mention that as an option for this commission if we need to dig into that item more deeply and try to revise it. So it's just something to sort of a plan B that's out there and we'd be willing to do. And that's all I had for that.
Okay. Anyone else? With that, the chair would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Have a motion by Mr. Ballard,
Second.
second by Mr. Hopkins. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you, one. Thank you all. Have a good rest of your day.